we're going to get started. Let's see, would you like to start with a roll call?
Yes. Okay, Member Bierce?
Yes.
Member Hodges is currently absent. Member Larson?
Yes.
Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Member Melchin is also absent. Member Rose Shears?
Yes.
And Chair Vihel McClanahan.
Yes. I have a question about the land acknowledgement. It was discussed in a city council meeting recently. To your knowledge, has any edit been made to it?
Not to my knowledge. I can double check on that for next month, but
Okay. Okay. I'm going to read it as is. It sounded like there was some wish to change it. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lishan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. All right, we're going to move to item 2, approval of the minutes from July.
any questions on the minutes?
I have a small correction.
Okay.
On item 5.1, it says this item was delayed to next meeting due to committee member absences, but it was actually canceled.
I will fix that. No need to, we can still approve it with a minor change like that, so.
Any other comments? Anyone raising their hand online? All right, I move that we approve these minutes with the adjustment as mentioned on item 5.1.
Second.
Okay, I'm just going to hold on just a moment because we do have Member Hodges joining us here.
Great. Hi, Troy.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. And you have to do your brief announcement, so I'll give you a moment for that.
All right. Yeah, let's see. What was the exact wording?
I think just noting that you're joining us virtually due to a contagious illness and letting us know whether there are any other adults in the room with you.
Okay, great. Yeah. What was just said? Joining virtually due to a contagious illness and no other adults in the room with me.
Okay, thank you. And we're just about to vote on approval of the minutes. I'll start with Member Bierce.
Yes.
Member Hodges? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, sorry, cut out. Member Larson?
Yes.
Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Member Rose Shears?
Yes.
And Chair Vihel McClanahan.
Yes. All right, great. We are now moving to item 3, which is public comment. There are no commenters in the room. How's it look online?
So we have a few hands. We'll start with Lucinda Young. Please go ahead.
Good evening. Glad to see everyone back. I just wanted to mention that the Albany Climate Action Coalition hosted a table at Solano Stroll, and we talked to many folks. One of the main things we talked about, the people were really interested in, is the foodware ordinance and responsible waste management, as well as electrification. I was glad to hear the foodware ordinance implementation is on the agenda tonight. One of the talks a lot about electrification rebates, and one of the concerns I frequently hear is the high cost of electricity. We've talked about that in here before, is a barrier for many people for electrification. Also, I hear that, they don't have enough room on their panel. And I recently went to a building decarbonization coalition, Switches On, did a presentation, and I was very interested. It was interesting to me to learn that many contractors routinely recommend a bad panel upgrade, and that in fact, oftentimes homeowners are able to accomplish their electrification objectives without the upgrade. And on the cost of electricity, I went to a presentation at the Albany Library by an Albany resident. His name was Paul. I had his name down here. Anyway, I can't find it right now. Oh, Paul Giganti. He had completely electrified his home and did a public presentation on his process. It was really interesting. And he's a mathematician and actually showed with very detail how he had saved money by electrifying. So I think this was really important. And I can recall a comment being made by a committee member here a few months ago to the effect that a homeowner is going to pay a lot more money to heat his home through electricity than with gas. And I believe that Catherine Bierce had commented, well, that's certainly not true with solar. But Mr. Giganti's presentation showed that's absolutely not always the case. And my personal experience, I have a harvest thermal system and I have saved money on my bill as well. So I think those kind of comments, kind of cross the board comments that you're always going to pay more with electrification should be avoided. And it's certainly contrary to the mission that the city is trying to do in encouraging electrification. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Jack Kenny. Please go ahead.
Hello, good evening. This is Jack Kenny. I'm one of the co-founders of the Albany Film Fest. And I guess I can't show you the flyer that I have, but we have a movie coming up I wanted the committee to know about. It's an outdoor movie. It's coming up September 28th. It's about climate change. Specifically what's happening in Greenland. The movie is called The Memory of Darkness, Light, and Ice, made by a filmmaker from Sacramento State. And we're going to be showing it on a blow-up screen on Cornell Avenue on the 28th, Sunday, at around 7 p.m. when it gets dark. Then we'll have some discussion afterwards. So this is a free showing. Everyone's invited to attend, and I hope people from the committee can be there. The other comment I have, I guess we're talking about the foodware ordinance. My other hat is with the Albany Rotary Club. We're putting on a fundraising event called the Taste of Albany on Sunday, the 28th. For all people who are participating in that, we're giving them a packet of reusable utensils for future use, and with messages about sustainability. So I just wanted to let you know about that.
Thank you. And I'll also note for Jack that if you'd like to share flyers or other materials with the committee, you can email them to cac@albanyca.org. Okay, we don't have any other hands raised.
Great. Thank you, commenters. All right, we are moving to item 4.1, a proclamation of appreciation for Benji.
Yes. Yes. So I'm hoping Benji's able to join us online. He said he would, but he might be unable to. But in any case, we'll read our proclamation for him. And if any of you have comments to share afterwards, I can send the video over. So, in honor of Benji Willett's term of service to the City of Albany, whereas Benji Willett has dedicated his time to serve the city as a Civic Spark Fellow, and whereas Benji came to the City of Albany with a passion for sustainability, social justice, and equity, and whereas Benji provided valuable project management for the street tree management plan, shepherding the plan to near completion, And whereas Benji developed materials, documents, and guides for the implementation of the city's sustainable foodware ordinance. And whereas Benji conducted extensive outreach with restaurants to help them comply with the sustainable foodware ordinance, developing trust and goodwill with his positive and helpful attitude. And whereas Benji engaged the community at multiple outreach events, sharing resources and information about sustainability, the street tree management plan, and waste reduction. And whereas Benji took initiative to work on several important projects, such as GIS mapping of bike parking and assisting with emergency management trainings. And whereas Benji approached every challenge with kindness, thoughtfulness, and unparalleled enthusiasm. And whereas Benji's dedication and expertise have assisted the city in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, making an impact on global climate change. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City of Albany wishes to express its sincere gratitude and appreciation for Benji Willard's service term with the City of Albany to help foster a sustainable future, and wishes him the best in his future endeavors. And I will fix that typo before finishing. Any questions about the, sorry, I'll put it back up there. Any questions about the proclamation?
No questions. Do we have any commenters who've called in?
We have one commenter, Lucinda Young. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Benji for all the great work he did for us. And he, I can remember early in his tenure, he took the time on a weekend to come to one of the Albany Climate Action Coalition tabling event and stayed with us for some time, helping talk to people. So really appreciated his going the extra mile and all his engagement with the community. Thank you. Wish him the best in all of his endeavors.
Thank you. Okay, no other hands raised.
Comments from the committee?
Yeah, thank you, Benji. Great work.
Really appreciated Benji's contributions, and just I feel like the bar has been set very high for Civic Spark Fellows. They're all so good, like the ones who've been here in Albany and other places where I've worked. Benji, kept it, kept the bar raised high. I think especially now when, civil service is maybe a difficult pursuit to go into right now, that people might be discouraged, and he just, kept it very positive and did a great job, so I really appreciated that.
Yeah, same. Thank you, Benji. The positivity was most welcome, and I think it is not always the case that is a trait that comes along with having a sort of a detail-oriented and analytical mindset, and Benji somehow miraculously has both, which is great. He will be a big asset to wherever he goes next.
Yeah, I just really appreciated Benji's positive attitude in here. It was really fun to see him smile when I came in.
Thanks, you guys. I'll share that along with him. We usually do pass the proclamation sort of somewhat ceremoniously, so if anyone would like to move it.
Yeah, I move that we adopt this proclamation of appreciation for Benji.
Second.
Member Bierce?
Yes.
Member Hodges?
Yes.
Member Larson?
Yes.
Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Member Rose Shears?
Yes.
Chair Vahel McClanahan?
Yes.
Thanks, everyone. I'll share that with him.
Okey-doke. Our next item, 4.2, is an update on what Benji was working on for the whole last year, which is the implementation of the Sustainable Foodware Ordinance.
That is right, yes. I'll be filling you in on a lot of what Benji was doing, with some of my help too, of course. So a little bit of background to start off. Just larger scale context, this foodware ordinance is something that the city council set as a priority and staff and CAC have worked on together, in large part because waste reduction is a major goal of the Climate Action Adaptation Plan, and plastic waste is a really, really big part of the waste issue that we have in Albany, as well as, a variety of knock-on effects related to the energy, water, all these things required to produce all of the plastic foodware that we use in the city. Short timeline here. So back in October of 2023, we began background research, policy review, kind of starting to think through what different options for a foodware ordinance would look like. We spoke about it here in the committee. In May of 2024, we launched several pilot programs with participating restaurants to understand more about what was feasible and what kind of requirements would work. In July of 2024, the committee voted to recommend a draft foodware ordinance to the council. In October of last year, that ordinance was adopted. And at that point, we began education and outreach. And enforcement of the ordinance begins October 16th. So we sort of built in this year of outreach, education, kind of giving restaurants some time to come into compliance before it actually went into full effect. So in that time, in this kind of past year or so, we've been doing a lot of different forms of outreach. The first major thing that we did was sent out a formal notice letter to all of the subject businesses, just to let them know that there was a new ordinance that they were subject to and what exactly it contained, providing them basic information about that. And then since then, we've done multiple rounds of door-to-door outreach, which we found has been the most effective way to actually, really get businesses to understand what this means and what they need to do. So there's been multiple rounds of that, kind of starting with just general information about there is an ordinance, here are the kind of main beats of it, and then in subsequent rounds going into more detail about specific pieces of that ordinance, answering different kinds of questions, kind of talking about the different pieces sort of one at a time, essentially. We've also developed quite a bit of material to support businesses in implementing the ordinance. So a few examples on the page here. We have sort of a summary sheet. We have an in-depth guide. We have customer-facing flyers. And then one of the most, I think, helpful pieces is a purchasing guide, which kind of lists out a wide variety of compostable, disposable options for a whole range of different kinds of foodware so that people don't have to sort through the endless mess of options that are, many of them plastic lined, right? And then we also, of course, have a web page, one of the pages on the city website that hosts all of these different materials and explains a lot about what the requirements are. We're also continuing to develop more materials as we go and as we're hearing feedback from businesses about what they need. We've also entered into a contract with a consultant group called Environmental Innovations. This is a group that does a lot of work related to climate and sustainability in the area, and in particular, they do a lot of work with similar types of sustainable foodware ordinances throughout the Bay Area and the sort of process of implementing those ordinances, so they have a lot of experience in this area. The contract we have with them is relatively small, at least for now, but one of the main things they're doing is providing one-on-one technical assistances to businesses, and that's free for the business. It's part of the contract. It's a limited number for now, so we've been kind of working with Environmental Innovations and particular businesses to see, which businesses maybe need some more help than others, and, kind of doing that process somewhat strategically. But it's a really great service because they're able to spend time one-on-one with those business owners. They know a lot about the different kinds of products that might be suitable for that business. They can help them work through some of the issues that come up with other aspects of the ordinance, and just kind of really get into the weeds with them. So that's been really helpful. And then the other big thing that they helped us with was putting on a miniature foodware expo for business owners. So this was a 3-hour event that we held in August. Or was it late July? I think it was August. It all merges together. But anyways, and it was really a chance for business owners to come and sample a bunch of different kinds of compostable products, get a feel for, what they looked like, how they worked, what kind of lids they had, how sturdy they were, the sizes, just really kind of get a feel for them. We had free food, of course, for eating in addition to testing products out. And then we also had environmental innovation staff and city staff there to answer questions and kind of talk through the details, talk about, how do the exemptions work, and, what kinds of food are you trying to put in what kinds of boxes, and have you thought of this, and have you thought of that, and really walking through it one-on-one again. So that sort of face-to-face opportunity to talk through what the challenges are, what the solutions might be, it's been really fruitful. And I think in addition to helping the businesses that came, it was also helpful for giving us a sense of, what are the issues that many businesses are likely to face? What are the concerns that many people have? What are maybe the confusions that a lot of people are likely to have? And so kind of helping us in future outreach understand those things. So that was really successful. And just kind of overall, I would say that businesses have been quite receptive and engaged in this process. Some of them are more excited about it. Some of them are not excited about it, as you would expect. But generally speaking, people understand why we're doing this. They're asking good questions. They're thinking through, okay, how do I do this, instead of just kind of rejecting it. They're open to solutions. And I think it's been a really good process of kind of working with them. So I've been really, really pleased about that, especially because I'm doing a lot of those conversations, so it's nice for those to be fairly pleasant. But it makes me feel good about our ability to kind of get businesses into compliance. Of course, not everyone's going to be 100% there in a month. We know that. But I think we're making really good progress. And also, a lot of businesses are partially compliant already, especially in the reusable category for the dine-in service. Most businesses have many, if not all, reusables already. We knew that going into this, that a lot of businesses were mostly there. But, throughout our outreach process, we've seen even more of that than we kind of thought there would be. So that's been really promising. So that's been really positive. Right now, we're doing another round of door-to-door outreach, kind of going through a checklist with businesses of, okay, are you, compliant on this item? Are you partially there? Are you not there at all? What do you have to do? Again, walking through those questions with them, and just kind of helping everybody check in on where they're at, and trying to sort of use the momentum of that enforcement date to really get people to hone in and start making those changes and finishing up the last pieces of compliance that they have to do. So that's where we're at with it. I think it's gone really well so far, and obviously still plenty to do. Any questions?
I guess great update. Good to hear what's working and what's not working, and just curious to know what community members can do. Should we be bringing flyers to businesses? Should we be bringing sample products? I know that it's the city's job in some way to do this, but I know there's a lot of environmental groups, the Albany Rotary, and there's ACAC that would be interested in helping out. So is there a flyer that we can bring? Because I eat restaurants, frequently, once a week, and would love to be able to keep something in my purse or my car or bike or something that I can bring with me when I go out, to have something to explain to folks as a consumer, to show the demand for that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously when it comes to enforcement and compliance, that's city staff's job. But I do think there's a really important element of showing restaurants that there's consumer demand for some of these changes. I think one of the biggest ways that we see that is consumer demand for dine-in reusables. So asking, do you have a reusable that I can, instead of giving me this plastic fork, do you have a reusable fork? And if they don't, say, do you know you're supposed to have one, and we have our sort of general flyer that is available on our website, and that, anyone can download that and hand that out if they want to as sort of, here's information about it. Here's city staff's email if you have questions, right? Another big one is, part of the ordinance is that businesses should be taking consumer-provided reusables, of course, assuming that they're correctly sized and clean and all of those things. So, if customers are going to restaurants and asking for that, will you take my reusable? That's also showing businesses that there's a desire for that on the consumer end, right? So those are the kinds of things that I think start to shift the needle a bit. Obviously, it's important to be careful and not, not cross that line of going into enforcement, but I think, information and showing consumer interest in these kinds of sustainable practices is important.
I was just curious about the takeout aspect of that. I mean, the dine-in, a lot of people are already kind of compliant, a lot of dishware already, but what was the reaction on the takeout part of it? And I'm just.
Yeah, I think, for most people, that's the bigger lift and the bigger concern. But there is a good amount of compliance already. And we've also seen a lot of people that thought they were compliant and aren't. So, for instance, you guys have probably seen like the kind of brown paper boxes that fold. A lot of people think those are compostable. In fact, they have a plastic lining, right? And so, through this process, we've talked to a lot of businesses. Oh, yeah, we have compostables. Can you show them to me? Okay, you don't have compostables, right? Of course, we say it very nicely. But so a lot of people that want to be doing sustainable things and purchasing sustainable things and don't know how, or they don't know what they're looking for, it's very difficult in this market to find things that are in fact compostable. So I think it's a challenge of like actually getting the products and like switching over restaurant operations. But for a lot of people, that was their intent, and now we're helping them actually accomplish that. So there is obviously some challenge when it comes especially to things like soup containers, because there's nothing on the market that's compostable and will work for that. So that is exempt. They're allowed to use plastic, same for cups. We're still working on exactly what that exemption list is gonna look like. It's gonna kind of evolve over time. But yeah, so kind of explaining to people there are some exemptions, but not for everything, and figuring out where that line is for their particular business is something of a challenge, but I think we've been making good progress on that too.
It sounds like for consumers, bring your own container for soup is a good action item specifically, or cups and soup containers.
Other questions?
Other questions? All right, we have any comments?
Okay, Lucinda Young, please go ahead.
Thanks, Michelle, for the presentation. I had a couple questions, like what is enforcement going to consist of? Is it a warning? Are there monetary fines? Also, I think, as you mentioned, as a customer, and I do this already, I've been doing it since the foodware ordinance passed. I don't eat out a lot, but, maybe once a week or a few times a month. And when I do see a business in compliance, I tell the manager, thank you. Hey, I see you guys are in compliance. And when they're not, and I have to say that frequently, especially for takeout, they are not. I asked them, do you know about the foodware ordinance? And usually they do. And what I hear is, well, we're going through all of our old non-compliant foodware, and then we will be complying in the future. So I think that's positive. But I think the public, as customers, we have a really big role to play and talking to the manager and letting them know that this is important to us. When I was at Solano Stroll, one visitor to the table had suggested, hey, it'd be great if there was some kind of sign in businesses that said, hey, we're in compliance with Albany Foodware Ordinance or something like that. And again, I know that requires some administrative work, but I thought I'd pass that along. And I'm also curious, I think you had said 9 or 10 businesses attended the foodware workshop or presentation. Curious to know what businesses attended. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we don't have any other hands raised. Would you like me to go ahead and answer those questions? Okay, I think I got them all down. So in terms of, well, I'll start with this. Businesses going through old stock, we have told businesses that it's okay to go through their existing products before switching over, mostly because we don't want them to throw away things without even being used once, and also, not forcing them to just throw away money effectively. And that does lead to some extent into the enforcement question. We're not planning to bring down the hammer on October 16th and make everyone throw away all their plastic forks, right? I think it's still a discussion that we'll be having about exactly what enforcement looks like. We were directed by council to be education forward, and not jumping into enforcement as quickly as possible. But, we do have a variety of enforcement mechanisms. I think it's just it's going to be something of a process as we go along of seeing what mechanisms make the most sense and how we should use them. So I think we'll figure it out as we go to some extent. And then regarding signage, we do have some customer-facing signage. We also have a custom waste sorting signage, like template that businesses can use. So we have a few things there that are meant for customers to get education about the ordinance. We're going to be developing more things as well based on some business feedback. But we have that available on the website, and we'll also be handing some of those things out as we get closer to the enforcement date.
Kind of a follow-up question, I guess. Who will do the enforcement?
Also a good question. I think I don't know exactly yet. I think it depends on exactly what enforcement looks like, but effectively it's going to come from the community development department in some form or another. Yeah. A lot of enforcement mechanisms it's sort of letters from the department director or something like that. I don't think I'll get a badge.
No badges. We're going to try to do this as an educational way. I don't think we want to have a big hammer that comes down, but we definitely are going to start working through that. And the nice part that Michelle isn't talking about is we're soon going to have our new fellow. So she will be on board and then, and be working on this with us. So we'll figure that all together, what kind of program makes sense. I mean, we're not, the city is not code enforcement heavy in the sense of violations and fines, et cetera. And I'm hoping we don't have to do any of that.
So if we have some hot tips on restaurants that are out of compliance, we just email you? Is that kind of yeah?
You
Okay.
can be our secret enforcer.
We'll be nice, but we're concerned citizens and yeah. Cool.
So curious about metrics. You showed the chart of our trash production over time, which is a really good way to measure the impact of this. I'm thinking also of the volunteer team that picks up litter. I have no idea if they count, we picked up 1 bag today. But I feel like that's where a lot of this stuff winds up, is just blowing in the wind. Blue Glove Crew, thank you, yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I know there's 1 or 2 other cities, although I couldn't tell you which ones off the top of my head, that did some studies before and after passing a foodware ordinance about litter. So that'd be really interesting to look at and see what they found. I'm not sure exactly how the Blue Glove Crew operates or if they do any sort of data tracking. I know we do have some cleanup events once or twice a year. That's mostly like around the Bay and Albany Hill, but in theory, you might still be able to see some data from that. So that's something I can look into.
Other comments? That about wraps this up. It's amazing. That year went really fast. All right. Well, that was item 4.2. We are zooming through this agenda, you guys. So we'll move right along to item 5.1, committee purpose and workflow.
I'll hand it off to Dina here at the beginning to introduce herself and the item a little bit.
So, first of all, thank you for having me here tonight. I don't know that I'll be here every time or get the pleasure to be here, but I did want to come and sort of hear who you are and a little bit about what's going on here as I start my role as the Community Development Director. I started the end of July, so I'm quite new. But I'm trying to work my way through this, and this is a very important piece of the Community Development Department because, for two reasons. One, because it just is important to look at these types of things, sustainability and climate adaptation. And we do have direction from the council to move forward as a priority, especially with electric vehicles and electrification of buildings, and also with respect to the CAP. All of that is a very big priority, and so we're going to move forward in that manner. I did want to sort of have a discussion about what we're doing here, how much can we do to kind of figure out what expectations we have of ourselves and we have with you. Right now, we really only have Michelle as a person in our department. We will have the fellow. We are looking at how to create another position. I don't have that all worked out yet, but I believe that's a hole in what we're doing in order for all of us to be as productive or as successful in this manner. So I thought what we would do here is sort of for the public and for us, and maybe for me, to go through the committee purpose and sort of how this workflow happens to help all of us understand what we can actually do with, or what capacity we have to get things done. And so I thought that Michelle and I kind of split this up and we can have a more informal discussion. You can ask, it's your first sort of look at me, and you can ask me some questions, and I might not have answers, but at least we can look into them. And I think that just for everyone, Catherine and I and Michelle had a discussion this morning about similar things to this, and I welcome any of you to do that. Of course, we want to make sure it's not a serial meeting, so we do want to be careful about that. But as we move forward with me here and Michelle and us as a team, that you feel free to call me. You can call Michelle, but sometimes you might not get her. You feel free to call me. Feel free to email me. You can give me little tips of what you're finding out there in the world, and also what you're thinking about at 3 a.m. And so I'm open to that, and that will make us all successful. So I just want to let you know I do believe this is an important thing that we need to do, and I need to figure out how to get all of that done with really just one staff member. So with that, we're going to go through this lovely presentation that Michelle put together.
All right. So again, as Dina mentioned, I'll kind of go over a lot of the basics here, and we'll have lots of time for discussion about it after. But some basic background: this committee was created back in 2007 as a Sustainability Commission. It was renamed in 2018 to Climate Action Committee. And it's done a lot of things over that time, much of which was well before my time here, as you know. But one of the big things recently was that it was really crucial in the development of the CAP, the Climate Action Adaptation Plan, and it now advises the council on implementation of that plan. We also have here on the right the description of the committee purpose, which is on all of our agendas. It's to serve as a technical advisory committee regarding matters related to climate action and to advise council on matters related to reducing greenhouse gases and adapting to climate change. And, you know, when we think about what that means in practice, that committee purpose, a lot of that comes down to, you know, thinking about the council's goals as they've stated them and how we implement them in practice and kind of get into that nitty-gritty that council often doesn't have time to spend, you know, thinking through over and over, month over month. Some of those major goals are in the strategic plan that council created at the beginning of this year. We spoke about it briefly a few months ago, but goal number 1, the very first, is reduce greenhouse gas pollution and adapt to climate change. And we have 3 sub-goals in there that Dina alluded to: continue to work to establish a pilot program for electrification of existing buildings, explore opportunities to facilitate EV charging, and identify opportunities to enhance management of the urban forest. So that's the council strategic plan, which is part of that 2-year strategic plan cycle. And then,
It's one goal, if I might just, it's
yes.
part is, it is one goal, but it is the first goal. And so we get to lean into that a lot. And we are doing a lot of that as part of our work.
Yes, thank you. No, jump in. That's great. And then, of course, there's the climate action adaptation plan goals. There's a lot of goals in there, but there are some of these overarching goals and kind of categories that you might remember from the plan. And of course, building electrification, low carbon transportation, and carbon-free economy, and then resilience are sort of those big 4 groups. And of course, we've talked about that a lot at this committee. It's not a surprise to anyone, but just focusing on that sort of council direction of those goals is a big part of thinking about the role of the committee. So now, when it comes to workflow, the way that this kind of happens in practice, obviously it's not always a perfect line like the one we have here, but essentially, you know, council gives that direction through the strategic plan, the CAP, whatever else. Staff takes those goals and those directions and kind of analyzes them, thinks about what those options might be for implementation, what the sort of different routes we could take are. And then CAC advises on those options. So, you know, policy directions, specific details about, you know, doing this versus that, and what's the dollar amount for the rebate we should give, and, you know, thinking about the ideas and feedback. And this section's a little bit of a loop here. You know, you guys probably know from experience that sometimes we'll go over things a few months in a row and we have subcommittee discussions, or, you know, staff takes something back and works on it for a while and then brings it back to the committee. So the sort of example of that, I think a really good one is the foodware ordinance, which obviously is fresh. We were just talking about it, right? But, you know, council adopted the CAP in 2019, and it had as goal 321, develop a sustainable foodware ordinance. Staff researched different ordinances, did some analysis of Albany restaurants, did some kind of legwork, and then brought it to the committee for discussion to think about what the different routes and priorities were for that policy. You know, a few different directions we could go, got some direction from the committee on that. Staff goes back and develops it more, does more research, does more outreach. Again, back to the committee for discussion, talking through the details, talking about different options. Staff takes it back and finalizes it, brings it back to the committee, recommends it to council, and then staff develops a report for the council that includes a lot of that information through that whole process beforehand. Council discussed and adopted it, and then staff moves to implementation, and of course comes back periodically for updates on that. So that's that sort of loop we see over here, right? And that whole piece of this is, you know, where things take a lot of time sometimes, or where we have to work through problems, or, you know, there's just a lot in there. But once we kind of get out of that cycle, we have a CAC recommendation to council oftentimes. And that's, of course, what the committee is able to do, is to recommend things to council to adopt. And once that happens, that goes up to the city manager and the mayor, who set the council agenda. Very similar to how the committee agenda is set, with the staff liaison and the chair and vice chair. And that process takes a lot of factors into account. It takes into account what kinds of other council priorities there are, or maybe exterior deadlines. Might take into account, the sort of level of interest or priority that the city manager and mayor have on a specific item that CAC recommended. Just how busy the council is at any given time. Might take into account some political priorities. There's a lot of things that get in the mix there. And it's those two that are making the decision about when and if it goes onto a council agenda. Once it's put onto a council agenda, or well, really a little bit beforehand, staff makes a staff report for the council. And that's developed by staff as a whole, and it's overseen by the city manager. And basically the purpose of that is to explain the different options and factors and analysis of that item to the council. In totality, what are the options that they can take, and what do each of those mean for the city? And then usually, almost always, it includes a staff recommendation for what the staff as a whole recommends the council should do. At that point, council will discuss it and make their decision, and then staff implements that council decision, and we end back up at the top of the loop there.
And I might add that what I look at as one of the most important pieces is the staff analysis and the development of options with respect to all of you, and how we get to where we have a staff implementation and a recommendation through the analysis. Because one of the things that does happen for staff is we get so, I don't even want to say it this way, but we get in the weeds, and at a technical level, we need you to bring us up to like, well, that's great, Michelle and Dina, but what about X? Did you think about Y? And so you guys are sort of our technical expertise as well, but also from a community standpoint that we may not see or have. And so then we can integrate that in some fashion and bring it back to you. So I think that the biggest part and the biggest lift for us is those two boxes in the beginning of the workflow. And the rest of it sort of engineering our way through trying to get it done and what priorities we have. And I might say that this was kind of my push to have this so that you could see how much work you do and how much work we do just to get, the foodware ordinance adopted. And it's all important, but it takes a lot longer than if we could just snap our fingers and have it done. That would be really lovely, but that's not what happens. And so I thought it was important, as I'm sort of trying to figure out how to get all this done and to meet your expectations as well. I thought this was an interesting piece to just put out there for discussion.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Dina. So with that, I think we can go into questions. Yeah, we usually do questions, comments. All right.
I have a general question, but what do you find most helpful about CAC input, and where does you find it gets to be challenging?
Good question. I think the most helpful places are, when we're going through policy options, there are a lot of places where there's not a right answer on how to develop a policy. The rebate could be $1,000, it could be $5,000, right? Like, it's a policy decision, right? It's an opinion-based decision. That's where I think CAC is the most helpful, because you're getting all this input from, members of the community. We're having a chance for community input through comments, rather than just me saying, well, I think we should do this, right? There's a lot of points where, if you've been in a subcommittee with me talking about these things, I'll say, okay, well, that's a policy decision, so what do you think? So I think there's a huge amount of value in that. And also, as Dina mentioned, bringing up things maybe we didn't think about, or, aspects of how this might affect the community that you as a community member know better than anyone else, or maybe through your own personal experience or professional experience have some insight into that we would miss. That's super, super helpful. And I think really, really important for having a thorough process. I think, where it becomes more difficult, I think one of the kind of inherent challenges of a committee is that, we meet once a month, and most of my time is spent on implementing work we've already done. We create the rebate program, and then I spend a lot of time implementing the rebate program. And when I come back to you a month later, it feels like not much has been done maybe, or, we want to work on something new now, we want to do even more. And the more we do, the more I have things on my plate. And so sometimes it gets a bit challenging because from your perspective, it's like, okay, what's next? And then from staff perspective, it's like, okay, now we have a huge amount of work to do now that we've finished that thing. And so, I think it's inherent to any committee, but it does become a challenge from a staff level, especially like Dina said, with essentially one staff member working on sustainability right now.
It's really helpful.
So as you said, there's one dedicated staff member here, and Michelle does a fantastic job and tremendous amount of work. But Dina, what is your perspective on leveraging the climate action plan throughout the city and influencing the culture of the city to have everybody be, part of top of mind for their department? How do you see that, and how do you think that you're going to approach that with that cultural aspect?
It's a really good question. I don't have a good pulse on all of the culture here yet, to be very honest. I've been, has it 2 months, or is it a little under 2 months? So I'm starting to get a feeling, and I think that as we approach how we recycle and how we look at transportation, how we get to and from work, and how, we just sort of use this building and the community in a more sensitive way, I think that would be a first step. And I think a lot of it has to do with education, just from recycling in town hall. I think we need to relook at that. I think we need to think about that. Our purchase policy, I don't know if we've looked at that yet, but how do we look at that for reusables and renewables? So all of those things will be something that we touch upon, and I know we'll have this other person coming to help us, but I don't know how much culture I can spread unless I have enough wings to spread that culture, so to speak. Takes time to get people to change, as you know, and so we're going to work on it. The last jurisdiction that I was at, we worked on it for a lot of the internal things that were not happening with how we purchase products, what was being used, how is it being used, how do we calculate that, and the recycling. But they were way behind Albany. So Albany was, when I got here, was way above it, So I think we do have Michelle, who's made a great inroad into it. And I think I'm kind of skirting around a little bit because I don't know enough about the culture to know what my focus should be and how we should work with it. And it's something we'll talk about because I think Michelle has a better pulse for that.
Yeah, I'll just say that, we do work with other departments very regularly on sustainability-related items. It's not like I'm the only one who cares about sustainability in Albany, of course, right? So that does happen. But, other departments have other priorities, and you probably know people in your life who, for some inexplicable reason, climate change is not their number one priority, unlike how it is for us, right? And you're like, how do I get you to spend all your time thinking about this? And some people are just not wired that way, or their job requires them to focus on other things. And so, it's not as good as it could be, but yeah, I think there's places we can grow that we've been working on and will continue to.
Now that Michelle jogged my brain, we are working with the Public Works Department on the electrification And we do that quite a bit. We look at facilities, we look at electrification, we look at opportunities together with them. In fact, I speak with the director about this all the time, and he's really focused on that as well. And so you're correct. We do some of that, but they aren't really supporting this activity. It's something a little bit different, so. We'll move forward on that. It's a good point.
What else can you tell us about this possible new person?
I have no information. It's something that I have just begun discussing with the city manager, because I realize we have a hole in our, we have a hole there and a need. Things sort of like that flow chart have to work through the process, and it goes through a public hiring process and, sending out a job announcement and figuring out who's out there, figuring out what the title should be, what do we really need, how should that be defined. We'll work with Michelle on that as well. So I don't think it's immediate, but I'd like to see it within the next 6 months would be great. We only have one human resources person, so I have to move into the other recruitments that are occurring. One is, I think, police chief, and then there'll be the fire chief, and then some other people. So I have to push through that part. But I would like to see it just from our workload to get there within, at least have an announcement out within the next, within 6 months for sure.
Yeah, just as a point of information, that's definitely something that commenters and committee members have been requesting for.
Yeah, and I don't have
Some time.
I don't have a definite approval for that position.
Yeah.
It is a thought process that I'm going through with the city manager. We do have support for that, but we have to figure out how do we fund it. And then we'll go from there.
Thank you. Other questions? All right, we can move to public comment.
Okay. Lucinda Young, please go ahead.
Thank you, Michelle, and very nice to meet you, our new Community Development Director. I'm really happy to hear from you. I just want to comment on the dire need for some more staff. Until, I guess, has it been 2 years since Lizzie Camarade left? It's been almost 2 years, I think. So in the past, Michelle was not the only person. And when Elizabeth left almost 2 years ago, I think most of us assumed that there would be a replacement. So it is very encouraging to hear that that may be happening soon. I know since Elizabeth left, there have been numerous public comments about when are we going to get some additional staff. Our city is supposed to be prioritizing climate. We have a community here in Albany that is deeply concerned about climate change. We passed Measure DD a few years ago, one of the few cities that had, a utility users tax earmarked for climate action. City passed a climate emergency declaration last year, which directed that all city decisions be made through the lens of climate change. And I don't see that happening at the staff level. I do not see staff prioritizing climate, and I think that is a problem. One of the examples, and the committee has heard of this before, but with a new community development director, I want to just mention again a very good example. The police department decided they needed a new parking enforcement vehicle, and the CAC was never consulted on this issue, even though electrification of the city fleet is a major part of the CAC or of the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. And a gas vehicle was purchased based on information incorrect information provided by staff. And had the CAC been involved, I think a different decision would have been made. I think there's a lot of expertise on this committee that is not utilized by our city staff, by our city council, and by our city staff. So I would like to see that. And I'd like to see the climate emergency declaration more widely communicated with staff. Thank you.
Thank you. No other hands raised.
At this time, I'm going to hit pause. We typically take a break around the midpoint of our meeting, ideally at the end of an item, but I think since it's exactly 8, now is a good moment. So we're going to adjourn. It's 8:01, and we'll come back at 8:06. Thanks for doing it. online. Just to let folks know who may be tuning in just now, we're on item 5.1. We received a presentation about the committee purpose and workflow and some public comment on that. And now it's time to do any discussion or comments that we have here on the committee. Okay, I'm starting. Thank you for doing this. This was a request that I had, and I would like to share the context as to why I had this request. I think it was last spring, I don't know if you remember, Eric, the Zero Emission Transportation Subcommittee brought, after working together with Michelle to develop a plan, a proposal for fleet electrification and also possibly chargers on city land. So that was in that process, that was that loop where it goes to the CAC and staff and CAC work together. And it came to the CAC and it was pretty fully baked at that point. Eric gave us a presentation with all the details. The CAC made a proposal, and eventually that proposal made its way to City Council, that recommendation. However, it so happened that the part in it about chargers on city property, while it had previously been part of the capital improvement plan for our city, so it was something that was budgeted for and had previously been looked into, in a subsequent cycle, the one that completed most recently, it was removed from the capital improvement plan. So here was a recommendation that we put forth, and we thought that we had kind of done our due work together, diligence, but something got missed because it did not ultimately get implemented by City Council. So I was ignorant of what happened between when we make a recommendation and when City Council looks at that recommendation. I was ignorant of the piece that is staff makes a recommendation, which may or may not be the same as the committee's recommendation. So I was able to look back at that and saw that staff had recommended something different. So to me, I sense in this process, it's important to be transparent about what's happening when that flowchart helped tremendously. And as well, I think for people, anyone participating in this process, both people who phone in or come to visit and people on the committee, it's important that we keep in mind that there is that one more piece where what we thought we had finished working on is not yet done and may not yet be implemented, or may be implemented partially. So just to be aware of that piece and attentive to that, what happens after it leaves the committee, and to do whatever we can do to make sure that we and staff fully understand each other, I think. So that was a big learning process for me, and I really am grateful to you for taking the time to kind of map it out for everyone to see. Thank you. Other comments? Have one more comment. Thank you, Dina, in particular, for calling out that the number one goal, like goal one of several in this strategic plan, is to work on climate. I printed the strategic plan. This is what I do. I have all these papers. And took a look at the other elements to see if they also have to do with climate. I think that's sort of the point that we were hoping to make with the climate emergency declaration, and as commenter Lucinda pointed out, that all city decisions be made through the lens of climate. So I want to briefly highlight what climate has to do with all the other goals, because it does, actually. It's not just goal 1. So goal 2 talks about housing. The objective of implementing developing affordable housing is definitely a climate issue for a number of reasons, but probably most specifically that the new housing we hope to develop will be significantly more climate friendly because it's going to be multifamily housing. As well, there's something on there about zoning and single family homes. So dense development near transit is a huge climate issue that we get to work on with goal 2. Goal 3 is related to that because it's about transportation. We do have an entire committee that works on transportation. However, they do not work on things like transit. So that's a little piece out here that no one really owns. Is that not?
No, I'm not disagreeing. It's just that it's not, most of that's not within city jurisdiction.
Exactly. So that's something we've struggled with, is like, to what extent does city get to influence transit? But I do see that listed here in the objectives to collaborate with transportation partners, increase transportation connections. So goal 3, transportation, also has to do with climate. Goal 4 is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we try, especially since the time that we had on our committee, a climate justice subcommittee, to ask the question for everything that comes to this committee, like, what does that have to do with, is this an equitable proposal? And I think that has a lot to do with climate because some of the policies we discuss here are only accessible to residents that have more money, and so we talk a lot about how do we equalize that. I didn't get much for goal 5, which is revenue, except maybe paid parking. We've talked about that as a way to get people out of their cars. And then goal 6 talks about public health and safety, which are both climate issues, especially because a lot of the disasters we prepare for are climate-related disasters. As well, under public health and safety, we've got discussion of the Albany Hill Plan, which has a lot of climate impacts, and talking about possibly acquiring more open space, which is impactful. So that was long, but it's goals 1 through 6 that have to do with climate. And I hope that we can remember that as we do our work together.
So I just got, that was a mental segue for me, because I wanted to talk about the climate action plan and just get your thoughts, or at least put the seed in place to think about an update to the climate action plan, because the one we have today is probably due for an update. I don't know what the exact schedule is. Michelle probably has that in her mind at some place, but I think it was really a good, when I first came into the Climate Action Committee many years ago, it was a really good guideline of like, you know, we didn't have to think of ideas. They were already there in the plan. We just needed to figure out how we were going to implement them. And so I felt like it was a good guideline that way. It feels like it could be updated. And when we get to an update, I think that one thing that I would ask is that the consultants involved, or whoever's involved, be aware of the implementation part of it, because I think the Climate Action Plan had a lot of good information, ideas, and, you know, objectives, but there wasn't very much in terms of guidance on implementation. And again, we have limited budget, limited staff, and getting input at least the beginning of how to, you know, implement would be ideal. And again, I think it, you know, it was a good working document for us. In the Zero Energy Transportation Subcommittee, we just kind of went through that and said, okay, what's next? You know, so that was a good thing. So I wanted to put that out there, that I think it feels like 2019 or something, so, which seems like yesterday, but apparently it was 6 years ago. So.
Eric, just as a quick point of information, we talked about that at our last meeting. We did, and the Brave, Catherine the Brave, volunteered to be a subcommittee of 1 to begin to assess what parts of it look like they need updating, because I think our general feeling at the meeting was that the overall plan is still really what we want to be working on, and there's still a lot yet to do, but there are things that are done that we can check right off, and there are figures that need updating. So maybe Evan's going to do some analysis on that. Oh, she's already done some. Ooh, yay. But I thank you for saying that about the implementation. That's not a piece that we discussed before.
Should we move on to the subcommittee updates agenda portion? I can get into that. if you'd like.
We could, if everyone has gotten to say anything they would like to say about committee purpose and workflow. I am not seeing any indication that anyone else has anything else. Oh, wait. Sorry. I'm hogging the mic today. So Dan and Eric were both here, in the past. You were here when the CAP was developed. You worked on it. Did you work on it as well? Okay. So I'm wondering if either of you has anything you wish to share in terms of history or cultural context about committee and the work, or if you feel like it's covered. Just by way of introduction, since we're all getting acquainted.
I mean, I can say I was on the original sustainability committee when it was formed, and we developed the first draft of the CAC with a technical consultant. None of us had ever gone through that before, so it was long and technical and eye-opening and all of those things. It took a lot of the work that we did as a committee was on developing that first draft. But it has also been a long time, so I can't, I don't have any crystal clear visions right here or nuggets to share. And I wasn't involved in round 2, so maybe Eric, if you have any.
I don't know. I think what I said about the implementation was the one aspect that I wanted to get across. That in hindsight, I wish we'd spent a little bit, at least gotten something from on that. And just the committee in general, I think that there's, when people put time into something, they get invested in it, and they want to see it come to fruition. They want to see it make an impact. And so I know that this committee is not a directing. We're not city council. We don't give directions. We don't, pass motions. We advise. But there are times when people feel like they want to get a little feedback about what's happened afterwards. And we know that staff doesn't report to us. And but there's been times in the past, in my history on the Climate Action Committee, where people got a little, I think, put out that they didn't see result, of what was, what they had put energy into. So not to say that things should change. I just think that should be an understanding. Staff understands that, and I think this committee at this point understands that pretty well.
That's very good for me to hear, so appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. I think that wraps up item 5.1, and I'm so excited that we have a subcommittee update in 5.2. Just before we start, do we also have any update from zero emission transportation? Okay, so we're going to go to, we got to add it to our agenda.
I know, I apologize for forgetting to add it, but nevertheless, our subcommittee member can go ahead and give an update.
Yeah, so in August, I sent an email to the ACAC email list and consulted with community members requesting feedback at a meeting at Kim's Cafe and the ACAC meetings. And the main updates or the comments that I got from folks were requesting to move the date up further from 2045 to sometime sooner. And the other piece around Resilience Hub, the community center, were the main edits that people had. And my thinking on those edits is that moving the date up for a net zero date might be challenging, given that the lack of resources the department has and lack of budget. So it seems like a nice to have, but without having a resources that seems infeasible to recommend that changing that date. And the other piece about the Resilience Hub, it could be perhaps, I would make some minor edits potentially to the section on 48 to page 48 to page 50 in the Climate Action Adaptation Plan that covers stuff around resilience built systems infrastructure, covers resilience of natural lands and systems, climate health risks. So these are related to, the plan already talks about very similar things, like the capital improvement plan having resilience as a goal, critical facilities, emergency preparedness, that kind of thing. So having something about a resilience hub might bring that all together into a nicer framework, but I don't think at this point it's necessary to revise the entire thing, go through a whole 2-year process with staff to just rewrite it, because the Climate Action Plan from 2019, while it is 6 years old, is quite thorough and quite excellent and really detailed and helpful and still, I think, has a lot of things to need to work on to guide us and continue to guide us. But the problem is not an incomplete or old plan. The problem is resources and staffing. So I think that Director Tassini has a really good plan there to look for resources to help bring to bear the people and budget to actually to implement the plan we already have. So we might finesse around the edges a little bit, but I don't think fundamentally it needs a lot of changes. So I know it has been a while, and perhaps we could refresh it in terms of if we had all the time in the world, all the money in the world, great. But I think my recommendation, based on what I'm talking to the community about, is that the Resilience Hub is a kind of a priority for the community because it relates to emergency management. We're going to have emergency management somewhere. If we have an earthquake, got to do something with somewhere. What's it going to be? That place should have storage and solar and storage and battery and resources people can rely on. And there aren't so many words in here on that, but it would be good to refer to that. But again, the obstacles I mentioned in July is it would be great to talk to Ava or whomever about that, but it's really the bandwidth constraint.
Questions?
Yeah. So sorry for missing the July meeting, and but can I just ask how, if we want to provide input on the climate action plan, we contact you?
Yeah, basically, you can email me.
I'll note that, if the subcommittee continues to keep meeting, someone can join the subcommittee. If you were interested, Eric, it might be that we choose to sunset the subcommittee next month, depending on, based on your analysis, that might be the way to go. So maybe that's not relevant, but, there are Brown Act limitations on communication between members. So if you really want to talk through the details more, it'd be better to join the subcommittee. Yeah, we could also have a discussion, you and I too. Yep.
So option 1, talk to Michelle directly. Option 2, join the same committee, join the party for research.
I'm curious for the idea of adding something about the resilience hub. I guess this is a staff question. Would it be pragmatic to just sort of if we were to do that, if a proposal were to come about that, to just sort of add a rider to the existing plan with now with more?
Yeah, we'd have to add an amendment to the plan.
Okay.
Which I think would have to go to council twice, right? Yeah.
Okay.
Was this adopted as an ordinance? I don't think, I'm going to have to see how it was adopted, and then we can determine what we do to amend it. Normally, in this instance, for a plan such as this, we would do an amendment to the plan. If it wasn't adopted as an ordinance, we don't have to go back to council for 2 readings, but we would go back to council to adopt that text amendment.
Thank you. Other questions? All right, Troy.
I got a question. Yeah, thanks for doing that outreach, Catherine. That's great to already hear the items that we might want to update. I was curious, kind of on the chicken and egg question of resources and goals. I guess, do you see any role it could be played if we strengthen the goals, and then that could be a reason to get more resources to pursue it? Or do you think the goal itself is not a strong enough lever to help influence that?
I think what Richard Cassini is referring to is we already have the urgency declaration from City Council approval. We have the climate action in the strategic plan from the city. I don't think changing the plan for the climate action plan would strengthen the request for further resources. I think we already have the case that we need to make for resources. So it's more about getting resources to implement what we're already planning to do is the thing.
Other questions? Do we have any public comment?
Actually, I had one more question.
Yeah.
I was actually goes, I guess, back to one thing Eric was mentioning. I was curious when you kind of had a suggestion to add more on implementation to the plan discussion. Was the goal of that more to help like vet ideas that are in the plan to see if they're feasible, or to help give us implementers more of a head start on running with the ideas?
I think it was that we've struggled with, we come up with good ideas and then we have this limitation of like, well, okay, how do we communicate that? We want the City of Albany residents to convert to electric vehicles, but we don't really have a communications person or a marketing person on staff that can help implement that, because a lot of it's public policy and persuasion of the community. And I don't see that we have that expertise in the city, and we didn't really get much guidance from the consultants on how to implement that kind of stuff. And the city influences, but I don't see that part of the implementation as being very strong.
Should I go to public comment, Chair? Lucinda Young, please go ahead.
Thank you. Great, very good discussion. I agree that we've got a really strong climate action and adaptation plan. Even though it was 2019, it's I have looked through it and studied it. And I think it's a really strong plan. I do think that, and there were several public comments, I think, at the last meeting about this, about moving up the dates for zero emissions, which is currently 2045. And I know committee member Bierce indicated concerns about not advancing that date because there was not adequate funding. And I just question whether that's a proper approach. I question whether the date to reach our goals should be driven by current funding. And it's sort of like what Troy had kind of chicken and egg. It seems to me it should be driven by the science as to when we need to accomplish that. And that date may in turn drive funding. So, and I actually met just last week a member in the Menlo Park Sustainability Committee, which is the counterpart to Albany's Climate Action Committee. And Menlo Park moved up. They had a 2045 date and they moved it up to 2030. And he says he doesn't know if they are going to reach that goal, but they still feel like they made the right decision in moving it up because that's what's needed. So I just want to throw that out. I think it's a hard decision, but I think that needs to be thought about, and that the date should not be just driven by current funding. Thank you.
I can respond to that, actually.
Yeah, sorry, just one moment. Thank you, Lucinda. Okay. We don't have any more comments, so go ahead.
I agree that we should be driven by the science in making our policy. Definitely agree with that. I think the challenge is how do we spend staff time best to implement the goals we have? And we can spend a lot of time revising the entire plan line by line to see which dates we need to move up and which things we need to change and what targets to set for each line item to reach a 2030 goal or 2035 goal or whatever it is. Or we can spend the same staff time doing the current plan we already have. So do we spend the time making the plan perfect or getting the work done? Is how I'm seeing it as a project manager, PMP myself. I just like a lot of competing priorities to think about, and I want to be mindful that, yeah, we should, ideally, in the perfect world, we would have an earlier date like Menlo Park does. They have a lot more money than we do, to be honest. I think they're a more resourced town. So I'd be curious to know what their budget is comparative to ours, and, in terms of can we accomplish the goal that we have set for ourselves currently. It takes more staff to do that. So while moving the date up, I think would be nice to have, and it might be get more resources. I think the reason to get more resources we already have established from the emergency declaration and the climate action being part of the strategic plan. We can lean on those in order to make a request for more budget. And then the next step is to get another staff person, and then maybe they can suggest moving the date up or not, or what else to do to accomplish these goals faster.
A question about that. When you were kind of working on this over the past month or so, is it your sense that there would be many or much staff analysis required to do something like change the overall date to net zero?
Yeah, so if you guys are calculating all of the emissions for each of the categories, and if you want to redo all those numbers, it's a big spreadsheet that's very detailed and very time consuming, because doing a GHG pollution analysis takes a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of time and calculations. So the what if scenario, if we change the date from A to B, you'd redo all the numbers, basically. And that seems like potentially useful if we have infinite time, but we don't have infinite time. So focusing on implementation of the current plan and getting resources for that seem to be more urgent and more relevant than redoing the numbers to have a perfect plan, in my opinion.
The numbers, are you talking about the numbers on the KPI?
Yeah, like, so if our goal is to get to zero emission transportation sooner, how many cars need to be EVs by a certain date, or how many charging spots we need to have by a certain date? I think we need to get chargers in Albany ASAP, of course, but how many, finessing some of the numbers around each of the targets have like general pieces here. Some of them have dates on them, some of them don't, but I don't feel like changing the date for the carbon neutrality is going to drive implementation of the current plan better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know, I hear what you're saying. I was just curious about the staff time piece because my acquaintance with the plan doesn't, the KPIs, the figuring, what progress have we made, that process is not, it's not in here. There's no number, there are very few numbers in the cap. And so that's why I was curious about this contention that we would need staff time to update the cap, because this doesn't have the figures you're talking about in it. And this is what we're asking about, whether we should update it in any way or not.
Right. I remember seeing some charts, for example, about the waste reduction or about the impact of flying or eating whatever.
Like the charts that say
updates. Charts about like showing we need to get this slope of the curve down. We need to get reduced gas usage in buildings, and like those curves and interim updates. It's not in the plan, but like I remember seeing various presentations by Michelle showing that we need to have this kind of slope to meet our targets, and then recalculating what slope that needs to be steeper to reduce it faster. Like that seems like useful, but not necessary right now.
Thanks.
Yeah.
There was no other public comment?
No.
Yeah, this is like a really meaty one. What other comments and discussion do people have on this? I want to second what the commenter Lucinda said. I feel very strongly that we are here to have ambitious goals and to set ambitious goals for our city. I think we absolutely should move the date up, and I do not see that that would be costly of staff time, but I do want to be sensitive that if it is, of course we want it to be doable. But yeah, I feel like most of the work in that is really just picking a more ambitious date rather than doing a lot of reworking of figures.
If it's just a matter of change our goal date, sure, but will it change anything else? Maybe, maybe not. Like, if you want to change the date, sure, we can do that. But I'm thinking, well, what is that going to change in terms of how the plan gets implemented? It still doesn't change the budget. It doesn't change the staffing. That's what needs to change first, implement the 25-35 goal. So if you want to change the date, we can do that. But my concern is not the date. His concern is the resources to achieve the date.
I'll note that Member Hodges raised a hand.
Sure. Yeah, I think the last comment I was going to make, and I don't think I have an answer here yet, but it's kind of, yeah, what we see as more helpful or harmful in relation to what a goal is. Would we rather set something more ambitious and potentially fail at that, or know that we don't have the resources to do it? Like, would that be, unmotivating to the people of Albany? Or would we rather stick to a more realistic goal that we know might lag the science, but we can have the satisfaction of hitting that goal? I guess maybe that's another good thing to anchor as we think about this. Is what feels most motivational to our town and our values to move climate action forward.
I wonder if it might be possible for someone who is the chair of the Sustainability Committee or Climate Action Committee at Menlo Park to inform us, even just by video call at the next meeting, about how they went about setting the goal and what resources they have. How much planning did it take? Did they just pick that number? So that I can feel more informed about some of this, just because someone's gone through this before.
It's a great idea. Is that something that interests you as a subcommittee action, to reach out to them?
I was going to invite Eric to join if he wants to join, have him reach out as well if he's interested in that. Share the workload.
You've been voluntold.
I was debating. I really would like to provide input. I haven't done enough with the Zero Energy Transportation Subcommittee that I'm already on right now, and I don't think I can take on another subcommittee right now. So, but I'll send comments into Michelle. I was wondering what the time frame is. Sorry to ask another question, but what is the time frame that we're looking at for the update?
Sorry, the time frame for what?
Time frame for the update or the edits or comments or whatever to the climate action plan?
This is all stemming from within the committee, so there's no external time frame.
I was going to recommend that we add Resilience Hub as a line item to this, and then if folks want to feel about changing the date, that would be something I would love to have someone else join the committee and research that piece, because I would like to share the workload.
Could do my famous join the committee for 1 month thing. Join the committee for 1 month and help make that happen, and then excuse myself from the committee. So I'm volunteering to join your committee for now.
Cool. Do I move that Katie join the committee then?
I actually can't remember if we vote on that.
Process?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
We can go ahead and vote just in case. Okay, Member Bierce,
Yes.
Member Hodges,
Yes.
Member Larson,
Yes.
Member Lieberman,
Yes.
Member Rose Shears,
Yes.
and Chair Van McClanahan.
Yes. Can't back out now. Great, now we get to do announcements and requests for future agenda items. I think it might be nice to, let's keep it, we'll start within here and then go to public comment if anyone has any announcements.
Well, I can launch off. We already had a commenter mention the climate-related movie at the Film Fest, which is on September 28th, as well as Taste of Albany, which, like he mentioned, will have reusable handouts and some information about the ordinance. We also have Dinner with Albany coming up on October 4th, which should be very fun. I've been working with our recreation staff to try to have compostable foodware available there. It'll be fairly limited since the city doesn't provide much foodware at all for that event, but we are still working on that. And then also the heat pump rebate program changes are now in effect. We've already had a few people apply for the heat pump water heater rebates, as well as those multi-unit ductless heat pump rebates, so that's great news. And the standard non-income qualified heat pump HVAC rebate is sunsetting on September 19th, just on Friday. So if you know anyone who needs to get their rebate, tell them to get their application in by Friday. Yeah, I think.
There's a beach cleanup on Saturday 20th from 9 to 12 by the Coastal Cleanup Group, I believe. Yeah.
Couple announcements. The Tech Clean California rebates for heat pump water heaters are still available for more money for water heater updates. Also, the IRS tax credits for heat pump water heaters or heat pump HVAC through the end of the year. And a couple events to note are the Verge Conference in San Jose in October. There's an October 4th Laney College event with some on permaculture and unconference for anybody who wants to share their expertise in climate and related things. 9-0 co-working space in San Francisco. There's a pitch fest for startups in climate action space. I think it's the 25th, which Pachamama Ventures. You can take a look at 90.com on that for any startups in this space. And it has agenda items as well. I can share separately.
And within the committee, do we have any requests for future agenda items?
Top of my list is community center electrification and or resilience hub. So like we're talking about today, you know, we want to edit the plan related to, and I know that electrification is one of the major goals for climate action and resilience. And then personally, I'm interested in seeing stuff around pollinator gardens, or like how do we make safer pedestrian intersections through enforcing the no parking zones, so rather than having just red curves people can just drive next to and park on, blocking off those red curb areas near the intersections with planted areas that beautify and store carbon and add biodiversity hotspots and also native landscaping there. And that can be done when we have anyway, so it's street. I mean, maybe Public Works can talk about that too.
I would love to have someone from Alameda or San Francisco, one of the cities that has done work on publicly accessible EV charging. It doesn't mean on city land or on public land, but publicly accessible EV charging. I saw my first Volt post in the wild recently. Was very inspired by that. And just would love to get a presentation from probably Alameda. I think they've made some progress, if I remember, and just hear about the challenges and successes that they've had.
I guess I'd just like to enter into this space the suggestion that Dan had about seeing if someone from Menlo Park can come talk to us. And I will try to work on that. I would like to sort of enter into the eventual list of requests. We look into home insulation as something that the city may or may not wish to offer incentives for. And the reason that interests me is personal, which is that we got all our work done to electrify our house this year. And our heat pump has never come on, the HVAC has never come on because our new this much insulation means the temperature never changes in my house. So now I'm really, really fired up about insulation. And I want to see, because that's a lot cheaper than getting a new HVAC system. So I want to see if there's a space for the city to help people with that. How about any public comment?
Troy, any comments? Or?
Oh, does Troy have something?
No, I did not.
Okay. Yeah, announcements or future agenda item requests from the public?
Lucinda Young, please go ahead. Oh, sorry, there we go.
I'd like to echo EV chargers, which Dan brought up. We have been talking about EV chargers in this committee for years. And I'd like to see something done about it. I understand that I think this is kind of an example of just some stovepiping that happens in the city. This committee's been talking about it. I know Dan's done a whole lot of work on it. We've had presentations on EV chargers here. But then I understand that Public Works is kind of doing their own thing on public chargers. And according to the city manager, although we've spent several years looking at the city providing some public EV charging, and even the city council had directed staff to install 5 EV chargers, which staff did not ever do. Now, the city manager says what they are focused, and the city wants to focus on is getting businesses to install public EV chargers. And that's fine, but I don't hear anything about what the city is doing to motivate businesses to install public EV chargers. We're a public EV charging desert. For those of us who are homeowners like myself, it's not a big deal. We have EV chargers in our home, but we've got a lot of people who are living in apartments, and they are not, even though they want to purchase an EV or lease an EV, they're not, because they don't have accessible chargers. I know someone who went out on a limb and bought an EV. She lives in an apartment a year and a half ago, and she's thinking about selling it because it is such a pain to charge it, to find chargers. The one, we had a level 2 charger behind the pizza restaurant on Solano Avenue. I'm not sure what happened to it. It seems to have disappeared. There's some construction going on. I don't know if it's coming back. Then there's 2 EV chargers at Sprouts that are out of order a lot of the time, and they are Shell EV chargers, which are very obscure. As an EV owner, you have an app for various charges, and Shell is a very obscure. Anyway, something needs to happen with EV chargers. Our CAT is a perfect example. Our climate action adaptation plan prioritizes electrification of transportation, but we're really, thus far, haven't done anything. As Eric points out, there's no implementation. And we need to, one way we can motivate people to purchase EVs, to lease EVs, is to have ample EV chargers. So I would like to see some more work in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no other public comment.
Thank you. All right, that concludes our meeting for tonight. Thank you, everyone.